Hi everyone. I want to share with you an experience of being in India, and it's really a lesson in our mind. It doesn't really matter where you are in terms of places, but some places are triggering a certain parts of our mind that we need to look at, and actually that's what guidance is for. Guidance is only for healing. It's never, we as a person, we always think of everything in terms of how comfortable it is for our personality and for the body, and we always think that that's the goal, and we always have the expectation that it's going to be comfortable and it's going to be, for the body, for the person. But the guidance, when we follow guidance, we have to be clear. I think if we are clear that it's really all about the healing of our mind and looking at our thoughts and our beliefs and finding out the power of our mind through looking at our thoughts and at our mind is actually the goal, then our whole experience of spiritual awakening can become much, much easier and much more freeing. It helps you, then it brings you the experiences that detach your mind from the form more and more. So once we came here in India, because it's such a different environment, and in a way it's not too different from Georgia, I think it's intensified more. But in terms of simplicity, parts of Georgia where I'm from are just as simple. But in India there is this intensity of look, the way you are being looked at, an intensity of noise, an intensity of movement. And for the first week or so, maybe longer, I don't know, I was very, very conscious when I was when we were walking on the street. And it's the main reason I want to share with you about this is that it's like a huge teaching about fear and about how our mind works and how this listening ability works. Because whenever we would walk along the street, the ego would give me all these different pictures of what could happen. And some parts when you walk, people are not used to seeing Westerners, so you are really, really looked at. And that made me feel uncomfortable because I don't know the culture, I don't know the way of thinking. So I didn't know what to expect. And of course, when something new comes in, the ego always interprets that as through the filter of danger. So we were walking through the street, and the ego would give me these images of danger, of what could happen. Like, now the cow can hit you with its things, or now you may be hit by a scooter, or these kind of things, like actual images of what could happen. And if our mind is not trained enough, you automatically just buy into those thoughts. You just see the picture and you take it on as if it's happening, and you recall or you react and you act upon those images in your mind when actually it is not happening. So for days after days after days, the ego was giving me all these images in my mind, and I actually felt fear. And I've actually felt uncomfortableness, but I also could see the images, and I also could see that they were just images the suggested images in our mind. That's what we are always saying. The ego has no power over us, over our mind, because it can only suggest to you a thought, and it can be in terms of the sentence in your mind, or it can be an image, a past experience, or whatever. It can only suggest a thought to us, or an interpretation. It's the same. It's an interpretation to us. And then it's up to us as the mind whether to take it on and act upon it or not. But if we are not mind trained, we don't have any gap between this image coming in and us responding to it. We automatically buy into it. So days after days, as I mentioned before, I would just see all these images and I would feel this fear. But after 2 weeks, a week, I don't know, I started seeing that none of these images were actually happening, because the ego says, okay, this didn't happen in the past, but it may happen. But every day we would go out and we would actually have a nice experience. Nothing dangerous would happen. So I could see again and again that the fear was coming, but it actually never happened. Nothing ever happened. And the fear, that's all the fear is. It's a fear. The fear is just a suggested thought and suggested image that we buy into. And oftentimes people say, when they are in intense fear, they say, how do I deal with this? What do I do? And in a way, it's frustrating that at the beginning you can't actually do anything. All you can do is observe and see that whatever is coming, the stories that are coming into your mind are not actually happening. So, which means the experience itself is showing you that what is coming into your mind is not coming true. So that fear is a lie. Your own experience is meant to show you what a lie the ego is. So after seeing again and again that actually none of these things were happening, one day it just snapped me out of it, and I said, I don't want to be afraid anymore. And it was not a loud realization or whatever. I just, in the morning, I did my practice, I did meditation, I did my lesson, I read the course, I prayed for miracles for the day, and then I said, I don't want to be afraid anymore, because the more you are becoming conscious of the fear and the ego's way of thinking, the heavier it becomes. The more you become sensitive to how it feels to think with the ego. So I thought, I don't want to be afraid anymore, somewhere in my mind. I noticed this thought only afterwards. So people say, what do I do? What do I do? I always say, pray. And sometimes people say, I don't know how to pray. I don't know what is the prayer. But it's actually, the prayer is, I don't want to be afraid anymore. So it's really a decision in my mind for a certain experience. So we went out, and I realized how relaxed I was. We went into the forest, just two of us, Ken and I, and we didn't know environment. We never been there before. It was just the woods, and we didn't know who was there and who would appear or anything. But I just felt so relaxed, and I felt like, God, so much lighter. Then I realized, oh my God, it's because I dropped the fear. I just decided not to believe in it anymore, not to give these images any power anymore. And from time to time, these images would still come to my mind, not as many, but it would be in the background. But that was the difference. This time, these images were in the background, not in the forefront of my mind, of my thinking. So there was a bigger gap, and I could actually, now I more confidently I could decide not to believe in those thoughts anymore. And it was actually really simple and really easy. And since then, that has been my experience, because I thought, that's really a decision. It has nothing to do with the world. You may say, oh, this situation is more safe and this situation seems to be more dangerous. But it's really because of whatever reasons. These people are more whatever, they're not used to of this, blah, 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 blah. But it's actually a decision of how you want to feel in a given moment. That's all it is. Nothing is actually caused by the world that seems to be outside of us, because as the ego is using outside world as an excuse to feel a certain way. But Jesus is wanting us to discover that the outside world has nothing to do with our state of mind, and it's purely our decision. And the more you practice that, and the more you see that, and the more you experience that, the more you realize that the outside world becomes more and more, you become, your awareness, your experience of you becomes more and more detached from the world and from the body and how the body feels. So this is what I wanted to share it for, because it doesn't matter where you are. It doesn't matter whether you are in India, in Europe, in Afghanistan, in South America. You only purpose of being anyway is to observe our mind and to see these thoughts, to see these suggestions of the ego. And at the beginning, when we start practicing it, and from time to time, it is more intense and we are not able to disidentify with it. But more and more we keep seeing it. We keep actually experiencing the intensity of the ego. More and more mind becomes detached with this experience, and then you actually miraculously one day realized, oh my God, none of these images are actually coming true, are actually happening. And I invite you, if you have lots of fears, and when you have a lot of fears, I invite you to look at all these thoughts, even use it for journaling. I invite you to look at all these suggested things, and I invite you to see whether they are actually coming true or not, whether they are actually happening. Because most of the time, nothing happens. But when we believe these thoughts, we live as if these things happened to us, when actually they didn't happen. They were just in our mind, in our thinking. And then we look back and we think that we suffered throughout our life, and actually that's not true. Maybe there are some moments of being triggered, but the ego is using this past thinking and this fake hypothetical thinking to make it as if it's happening all the time, as if it's really happening. But most of the time, none of those things are happening. And when we are triggered, those are actually opportunities to detach from the ego. Nothing is actually going wrong. So I invite you to pay attention to your thinking and to what the ego is suggesting to you, how it feels, and whether it's actually even happening in form, because this is your chance to free your mind from the tendency to think with the ego, to side with the ego, because that's the only power that the ego has. And we are actually constantly being shown the answer. We're shown that we just need to observe our mind and see that we are just believing in a lie, and we are giving power to something that's actually not true. So this is the purpose of this video, is just look at your fears and see, are they actually valid or not? Actually, most of them, more and more we observe our mind, the more and more we come to realize that none of these thoughts and none of these stories are true. But we have to observe, and we have to give ourselves a chance of detaching ourselves from these stories. So I just leave you with this question and with this opportunity to observe your mind and to learn more about your mind and to become familiar with your mind. That's our only purpose of being anywhere and doing anything, is to get familiar with our thinking. We're so addicted, we're so attached to the form, to what is happening, to how things are happening. We're more constantly looking outside. But the only purpose is to observe my mind and see what I'm feeling and what I'm thinking, and deciding how I'm going to use it. Am I going to use it for the mind training, or am I going to use it to play a victim? That's our options. Those are our options. So observe your thoughts, observe your mind, and be free.